Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I found in my travels. Today it is Poetry Thursday, so I wanted to talk about some interesting poetry that I've stumbled across lately. And we are in that period of Pride, so I'm talking about LGBT poets, ideas, things like that. And today's poem is all about just observations of the community around you. I am referring to The Happy by Ari Banias. For those who don't know, Ari Banias is a white American writer who does a lot of work on the West Coast. They've been getting their work published for the past 10 years. I don't think they have a lot, but they do work as a professor, as a teacher, that sort of thing. It's also important to note that they are what appears to be trans. That's based on what I've read about them. So if I'm wrong, somebody correct me, but that seems to be the case, and that is, why I'm talking about during the period of Pride, from late May to the end of July. A very interesting writer. The poems are somewhat hard to decipher, as I find with a lot of LGBT poets sometimes. It's maybe that's just me not really understanding poetry in some cases, but sometimes a lot of LGBTQA writers are writing in different and unique styles that don't quite, mesh well in my brain or something. But today's poem is quite interesting. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about it. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. The Happy. In a room more chicken coop than room, I rent a fan that feels on my face like sound. Low traffic from San Fernando, named for a king who became a city, a valley, a saint. We are meant to repeat his name. Instead I say prickly pear, a cactus which spreads in many paddled hands into the space around itself. No pears. I call Mom to ask what the latest austerity measures mean. Some ants on the wall make their way from one unseeable point to another. The banks have closed. I tell her to barter. Barter what, she says. An acquaintance post tourism, the best way to be an ally to Greece, as if in each tourist pleasure bloomed a charity. Mules clabber down the stone paths loaded with grapes to make next year's wine. If the tourists come back next year, and we hope they will. I say we, but I'm closer to they, living temporarily in a neighborhood named for the happy. Who were who exactly? I grow a little stiff with, a little lean with, a little faint with, a little worn with seeming. I must need to conquer my mind. The rose is dead because of drought, because whoever lives here cares enough to let their roses die. I must need to conquer the notion anything needs conquering. Something in me can't tell what belongs. The ants for whom anything is a street. What sounded like a gate opening was eucalyptus branches dragging themselves along the tin roof. A yellow butterfly has no interest in me. I have no interest in kings. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Happy. In terms of analysis, there's a fair bit to talk about with this poem. In terms of narrative, I think it's just one person sort of observing things in the room around them, because you see that pretty early in the poem. They say, in a room more chicken coop than room, I rent a fan that feels on my face like sound, which is sort of an interesting description of the, how a fan feels. And then, they say, I call Mom to ask what the latest austerity measures mean. Some ants on the wall make their way from one unseeable point to another. And then talking more about the ants later, and then what sounded like a gate opening was eucalyptus branches dragging themselves along the tin roof. A yellow butterfly that has no interest in me. I have no interest in kings. an interesting way to end the poem. But you see a lot of just observations in this, noting things around you. But you might think, well, you can't really understand a poem or understand a person's way of thinking by looking at observations, and I disagree. I do think there's a sense of sadness in this poem, much in the same way that when you read some of Emily Dickinson's poems, especially the ones where she's just like sitting in a room and looking at things, you kind of get a sense of sadness there. Because if you describe something as more chicken coop than room, and you're reflecting on like what a city means. It's like it's named for a king, but that's not necessarily, I don't care for kings. Like there's clearly something wrong. Like maybe not necessarily with the writer itself, but maybe what's going on in the world around them. And so you can see that at a few points in the poem. They talk about the latest austerity measures. So that's clearly a problem. I do think this might be happening in Greece, especially when they refer to mules clambering down stone paths and grapes in the field, because if this was written, in any time in the past 10 years, or closer to 2015, around when they first started getting published, that might have something to do with Greece, because Greece went through a depression, and then they had to pass a lot of austerity measures, which caused rioting. It caused uncertainty in Greece, and many intellectuals left the country as a result. So you got austerity measures, you got tourism, people talking about tourism. There's a drought that's going on. And there's an interesting line from that part where the narrator says, "The rose is dead because of drought, because whoever lives here cares enough to let their roses die," indicating that they realize that you shouldn't be wasting water on roses. You should be saving that for people who might need it. A lot that you can glean from those couple lines there. But what's going on around the narrator doesn't necessarily feel that great. If they're in Greece, they're dealing with the depression, they're dealing with the austerity measures that came, and even in the modern day, like at the time that I'm talking in 2025, I don't think Greece has fully recovered from what's happened yet, although they aren't dealing with that huge depression anymore. So yeah, even as you observe, there's a sense of sadness in this poem, and things that aren't quite going so great for the narrator or the people of Greece in the background. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Happy by Ari Banias. An interesting poem, but quite sad when you really look and try to examine what it's saying, or trying to capture what the writer is feeling as they're writing it. If you have any thoughts on it, let me know in the comments below. I will put a link to it in the description, so let me know. Go ahead and read it and tell me your thoughts and whatnot. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so other people can find out about this poem, this poet, or Poetry Thursday if they want to also catalog poems for themselves. Otherwise, don't forget to I already said that. Otherwise, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and room observing travels. Farewell.